I'll let you take over here. Thanks so much for everybody to be on there. And let's see what you guys have to show.
Okay. And, I wasn't sure, how many folks we were going to have, and so we can be, pretty informal, and y'all stop me and ask questions as they come up. And I'm going to kind of go through what we do and what our EDDMapS system does, and show some examples. And if you have any questions, just stop me, and we can go from there. And Slade, can you hear me okay? And I guess say something so we can make sure we can hear you, because I saw you just came on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good. So,
right.
And I am recording this. I guess I started recording it about 10 minutes ago, so we'll have a bunch of junk at the beginning. But I will try to this afternoon get it converted and saved somewhere where anybody else that couldn't get on can listen to it. So now, does the PowerPoint screen look okay? Is it the right size for everybody?
Yes, it looks
yes.
fine.
Okay. I know sometimes the resolution can be an issue, so I wanted to make sure that was okay. Okay, so I guess a little background. I guess this is kind of a follow-up to y'all's Farm Bill proposal, and I guess coming out of that, Helmut had contacted us about EDDMapS and what it did and how it was being used, and so I kind of suggested probably the best thing to do would be for us to do a webinar like this, and we could kind of quickly go over it and show what we're doing and some of the different things we're doing and how we think it might be useful for what we think the direction y'all are going in and what y'all are doing. So to introduce myself, I am the technology director for the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health here at the University of Georgia, and Keith Dowse, who is the co-director of the center and an entomologist, is here with me. And my background is in computer science, but I've worked here at the center for 15 years now, and actually, as a little bit of a background, one of my first jobs within the university was doing as the CAPS data coordinator for the state of Georgia, and at that point, Keith was the state survey coordinator, and so we've kind of got a strong background in the regulatory CAPS arena, and as we talk about EDDMapS, a lot of when we developed the EDDMapS system, which does focus on plants primarily at this point, we thought about a lot of the regulatory and CAPS type issues along the way. So the center at the University of Georgia is a collaboration between the School of Forestry and Natural Resources and the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences. The two directors, Keith Dowse and Dave Moorhead, one's a forester and one's in the college, and Keith's in the College of Ag with entomology background. And kind of what our logo and our center's focus is pulling together forestry, agriculture, invasive species, and information technology. The next slide is just our group here at the center. And a lot, until recently, we were referred to as the Bugwood Network until the university made us a little bit more official, and we became the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. And so this is our Bugwood homepage with links to a lot of different resources we have. We work primarily on extramural grants and cooperative agreements, but the center was formed to provide some long-term sustainability and core funding within the university. And all of our focus is extension outreach, and so everything we do is free for educational use. We host all of our database systems and web servers in-house, and have a kind of a dedicated server room to keep things running. And we've calculated, and we have about 99.5% uptime on a yearly basis. A lot of the way we got started and what a lot of our work has been what we call the Bugwood Image Database System. It's the image database that has almost 150,000 images in it now, and it's been available since 2001. And the interfaces to that are forestry images, IPM images, insect images, and invasive.org, which is kind of our portal to our invasive species information. Invasive.org is kind of a clearinghouse for species-level images and information. We've received about 250 million hits to it since 2002. And currently, we're number 5 on Google for invasive species and 6 for invasive plants. And the funding and support right now for this website is primarily from APHIS to kind of provide image support for the CAPS program. So getting into kind of what we're focused on now is early detection and some kind of response. And so at the National Invasive Species Awareness Week last year, we had a panel on early detection, rapid response, and a lot of which was plant focused, but I think they kind of fit across all taxa. And some of the strategies we came out of that was that you needed to develop a common operating platform for invasive species distribution data. That you could use your cooperative weed management areas or cooperative invasive species management areas. It's good local detection early networks because you had people on the ground that were organized at a local level. And then use early detection as a means to educate the public on invasive species issues. And then when there are early detection reports and especially the public reports thing, having a good way to follow up with them to show accomplishments and hopefully show some kind of eradication or restoration depending. And then one thing that always comes up is, and something I know y'all are very familiar with, is how do you handle regulatory concerns and past the regulatory concern in citizen scientists. So this, along with another outline that Randy Westbrooks with USGS has put together on what an early detection rapid response system for invasive plants in this case would look like. The focus is interagency coordination, early detection networks, which we mentioned before, survey and detection, reporting, rapid assessment, and rapid response. And so, with the EDDMapS system, our focus has really been on the reporting side of things. So when we developed EDDMapS, and as we continue to develop it, we kind of looked at it from 2 standpoints, that you needed a common operating platform for distribution data and a way to do easy electronic reporting. So I'm going to start off by talking about that easy electronic reporting, and I'm going to use the Missouri River Watershed Coalition as the example. And so the Missouri River Watershed Coalition is a group of 6 states that have come together to work on various different projects, focused primarily on invasive plants. And the Center for Invasive Plant Management out of Montana is kind of spearheading or been contracted to kind of spearhead that program. And they were looking for an electronic early detection system. And so they came to us to develop that system. And so the state weed coordinators from the 6 states, which is Colorado, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, came together and decided, let's build this system for early detection and rapid response for invasive plants. And so we took the framework that was developed for EDDMapS and made it work for this application. Since then, we received additional money from the Forest Service and opened it up to other states to be included, and those states that at this point that have been included are Iowa, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, and Washington. So at the weed coordinator level, those states have said they wanted to partner and be included in this project. So just to kind of go through quickly the web form for that, the first thing you do is you either register, provide contact information, or log into the system. You choose the state in which you want to report the invasive plant, and it gives you a form. We try to make as easy to use as possible. You start typing either a scientific or a common name. It gives you an auto-suggest drop-down. You choose the species of interest. It pops up a picture of that species, and then that picture is actually linked to more information that's part of the invasive.org system with more pictures and links to other information. Going back to the form, you have other information such as, you know, the date it was observed, the infested area, the gross area, the habitat, canopy closure, and a description of the plant. Then we built a tool where you choose the county that the plant was found in. And once you choose that, then your Google map over here on the side then takes you to that county, and you can pick up the pointer and move it to the exact location where the infestation was found. So if you do not have a GPS unit, you can use the tools within Google to find the location you were in. We also allow uploading of pictures to go along with that, that find. And included in this, we started off with a very short list of plants, but we expanded it to a long list of about anything that could be considered invasive, but then we also gave the user the option of reporting an unlisted plant or an unknown plant. And then once that report goes in, the user is given a feedback page saying that your report's been forwarded to your state or county verifier for review, and it will not display in EDDMapS until it's reviewed. And so the state weed coordinator, in this case it was Montana, so Dave Birch gets an email with the information and pictures, if there were pictures to go along with it. He has a link to review the records online. He can go look at the records that need to be reviewed, click on those records, see the information, and determine whether or not you know, it should be reviewed. I mean, it should be released. And so there's a check mark to say whether he's reviewed it. There's a check mark to say whether it should be released to the public or not, or released through EDDMapS and show up on the map or not. Then there's also a check mark for private, where if the coordinates are for some reason sensitive, you can check that, and at the verifier level, check that, and then the record would only show up at the county level and not show up as a point on the map. So then we built an alert system on top of that, and the way the alert system works is the report comes in. If it's an actionable species, in which currently all the plants that are part of this for the western states are considered actionable, then an email is automatically sent to the state regulatory or verifier, and is not shown on the map. And so an alert would not be sent out for that species to anybody that signs up for alerts until it has been released by the state weed coordinator in this case. If it's a non-actionable species, which many of the species in the east that we're currently working with are not considered actionable, then the state verifier gets a report. It automatically shows up on the map with the caveat that it is not verified until somebody else reviews it, and the alerts are automatically sent out. So to kind of help make it easier as things have moved along, we have built a couple of different ways to make it easier for people to report things. And the first is what we're calling EDDMapS Mobile. EDDMapS Mobile is a mobile version of the EDDMapS website that will run on a smartphone. Instead of being an app, it's just a mobile website, and I can go into the details on the difference later if I need to. But so you have this, you know, on your smartphone. You open up the browser, you go to mobile.eddmaps.org. It comes up with this screen. And you can go through and click, you know, report sightings. You then choose what project you're involved in. You choose the state which you're in. Then the phone, and if it's an iPhone, will ask you, you know, would like to use the browser would like to use your current location. You say OK. It finds your current location. It gives you the ability to correct that that location and move it to the correct location if the point's not exactly right, because the GPS units on phones are not always 100% correct. You can then choose the species you're interested in by common or scientific name. Once you choose that species, then you have a simplified reporting form you can fill out and submit from the field. What we found in doing this development is that the iPhone will not let you upload pictures from the browser. It's a limitation, probably for security reasons, that will not let you upload pictures from the mobile browser. However, the Android will. And so because of that, we've kind of focused our app development on the iPhone at this point, and then we'll be moving into Android development later. So kind of following along that side of things, the Everglades Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area a few years ago put out this field guide to select native and non-native reptiles in Florida. And so we took that field guide and turned it into a very basic iPhone app that will basically flashcards. You could view the identification characteristics for the pythons and the other species in Florida. This was a very big success. We received a lot of press for it, both in local newspapers in Florida, nationally on the USDA blog, and then also by American Hunter, which is one of the NRA publications, and Field and Stream's website both featured the app. And also Scientific America magazine featured it as part of a thing they did on iPhones to iPhones. So we released that in July 15th of 2010. We've had over 3,400 downloads. So that led to us expanding that into a full-fledged ID and reporting app, which we called I've Got One, and it was released on October 4th of this year, and it allows you to ID and report both plants and animals in Florida. Because we're partnering with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, who has the regulatory authority for the exotic animals in Florida, then we've moved into the animals as well as the plants for this app. And I want to quickly go over how the app works. Let's see if I can. So when you click on the app, it opens up. You log in. Once you log in to EDDMapS, it gives you the animal list. You can scroll down and look at the animals. You can click on the arrow and see information about the animals. You can also click on the picture and view the picture to go along with it. We've included in this case both native and non-native, and some of the native lookalikes, and the same thing for plants. And you can pinch and zoom into the picture to see more detail of the picture. Then when you click on go back and click on an actual species, you're able to upload a picture. In this demo, the GPS does not work on the simulator, so it takes you automatically to Apple's headquarters. So in this case, we're reporting Australian pine on the Apple campus. You can put in the infested area. For animals, you put how many you observed, and then you save the observation, and it is saved into your queue. So all of this would work in the field without cellular coverage, and then when you got cellular coverage, you could upload it. And so it allows you, for the iPhone, both to upload pictures and then also to save things for when you don't have cellular coverage. And in this example, you know, that record's uploaded, it shows up on the map, and you can, if you have, you know, wireless connectivity, then you can actually zoom in and see the location live that you just entered live on EDDMapS. And so there's other features to the app that we'll show in a second. And as you can see, this one, for this example, it goes in is not verified until somebody would have verified it. If you had that second quality control step in there, then it would not show up in the app until somebody checked off on it. And we'll let this run for just a second to kind of show you the rest of the app. You know, for the Python, so there's the Python locations on Florida. In Florida, you can log on, log out of the system. We also included help, some plant information, more, you know, detailed information on plant identification, and then also links to the organizations and credits to the folks we're working with. Part of this app was based on work that was done at UCLA as part of the What's Invasive project, and I'm going to get more into that later on how we're collaborating with them. So to go back to the PowerPoint, if you do get on to, at least in the Apple Store, there are actually very few apps out there. Nebraska and South Dakota both have some that are focused on invasive species of any kind. The next one that we're working on developing is to take a more detailed field guide with multiple pictures and turn it into an app of invasive plants of southern forest. And so that's currently under development, and it's also going to include the reporting functionality, but have a lot more detailed field guide applications. So that's kind of the reporting side of EDDMapS. From there, it kind of goes. We kind of go to the distribution common app, platform, and kind of to reemphasize. Here's where the states that we currently have projects of some sort. Obviously the Missouri River watershed and added states over here, and then we started in the the southeast and working in those states. Have some projects. As I have a project in the Mid-Atlantic region, doing working with Minnesota Department of Ag and Illinois, and then with the New England states. Texas is an interesting case. Texas has its own mapping and early detection system, and so what we're doing with them, because they have the infrastructure in place, is they're sharing their data and reports with us on a routine fashion. So all the data for their state project ends up in the National EDDMapS project. One thing we've been very fortunate with this program is we've received funding from the Forest Service, the Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service to support it. So we've been able to do some enhancements and some work that work for each of the different funding agencies. We currently are handling 1.5 million records in EDDMapS, of which about half of those are actual point records. Some of the other ones are older county-level herbarium records. And we've got over 1,000 people who have registered who have actually submitted data, and even more who have registered. And the website received 7.6 million hits in the last year. To quickly kind of look at the data, got a lot of data on plants from the BODM North America and the USDA Plants database was kind of our base level, where here's where the national databases show these plants exist, and we're trying to kind of fill in from there. Then if you look, obviously some large state projects that we've received data from. Again, most of this is plant data. But if you look, what's interesting is, of the top 10 submitters, yes, we've got some pretty large groups of data, but we've also, the other 996 users have submitted another 200,000 records. And I think that's important because a lot of those are, the citizen scientist type folks who are, or even professionals who have gotten excited and gone out and made an effort to map things. So currently we're working on a national project with the Forest Service to kind of help fill in some of these county distribution maps nationwide. And then once you could fill in, the gaps and determine whether or not, Japanese honeysuckle is not found in the few counties in Utah, or is it, there's just not data on it in those counties, other counties in Utah, then that helps you, that helps determine where you start drawing the lines in the sand and determining what's an early detection species. And so just some examples of the county distribution maps. We also have the ability to produce county maps at a regional level, and here's just an example of a southern region map. And then the data is also, when there's point data available, mapped on the on a Google Map interface, and so you have all the functionality of Google Maps, and you can go on, and ease of use of Google Maps, and you can go on, zoom in, and change the backgrounds to the different layers that are included in the Google Map interface. Then once you click on more information on a record, you can go to the full information on that record. We're trying to build a community aspect to this where the users can have their own profile pages and show who they are and how many records they've submitted, et cetera, et cetera. So, all of this from the plant side of things has been to kind of, fill in the gaps and help really give a better grasp nationwide on how big some of these problems are. I mentioned the National Distribution Project, and we've hired somebody to be our EDDMapS data coordinator, who's, her job is to kind of go out and find some of these data sets, aggregate them, pull them together, and make them available. Just to kind of go through some of the other things we're doing, I mentioned earlier the Mid-Atlantic. So developed a website for the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network. The focus of this is primarily on plants, but we're looking at also adding some insects and other pests that there's not already some established programs for. And what this has really been about is building partnerships with different groups and different agencies. We've got a project where we're focusing on biocontrol of invasive plants and mapping those releases. A lot of that's been in the western states also. I think, the map showed Alaska. We've been partnering with them to make available their Alaska Exotic Plant Information Clearinghouse data available as part of EDDMapS, and previously they did not have a way to map and visualize that data until they were able to do it through the EDDMapS interface. Florida, obviously, we've been working a lot in, mainly because of the focus on the pythons and the other exotic animals in South Florida, as well as, they spend a lot of money and effort on plants in Florida, too. We've been able to build some interfaces like this where you can show multiple species on one map, and then, use the check boxes to show what species you don't want to show. I always say that this is a map showing where you do not want to visit in Florida because of the large snakes. We've done some specialized stuff like for the national, for a group of wildlife refuges that wanted an early detection system built for them where you could go in and report stuff at the refuge level, and then it would be sent to a manager at that refuge. Minnesota Department of Ag did something interesting. They worked with us to develop the reporting form where they could go on and report things, and then they are using a web service to pull the distribution data from EDDMapS and actually map it on their State Department of Ag website. So, we have the ability to make that data available and be pulled out and mapped on a local website. Here's an example I think this might be of particular interest to what y'all will be trying to do. Here's an example of a survey that was done along the Ohio River and then also in some of the lakes and ponds in this central hardwoods invasive plant network. And with this map, we're able to show both the positive finds as part of the survey, the positive records that were already in EDDMapS in blue, and then also the negative data, which is obviously very important when you start looking at survey work. We're partnering with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy to implement EDDMapS for the Appalachian Trail. And then what we've been working on a lot recently is taking and integrating some existing programs, such as the New Invaders program in Chicago, into EDDMapS, where their data and information and website will be transferred over into EDDMapS. And in doing so, we add some functionality they had that we previously did not have. And they don't have to deal with maintaining the database side of things. All that's taken care of for them through EDDMapS, and they can just focus on the education outreach. I mentioned what's invasive earlier. We've been working with UCLA, and over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be transferring the What's Invasive website as well as the iPhone and Android apps over to the University of Georgia, and making and then we will continue to maintain and keep those, both the Android and iPhone app, going into the future, as well as the observation data will be included in EDDMapS. There's some other projects out there we're partnering with in the Great Lakes region, and then we've done some specific, species level mapping. This is the kudzu bug that has been found in Georgia that is not a species of regulatory concern yet, but there's an active monitoring effort, so we've been able to produce some maps showing the distribution, in different colors for each year, showing the spread. And the same thing for laurel wilt. When it started getting into where the avocados were being grown in Florida, then we worked with the Florida Department of Ag to build a reporting form, and then also map the distribution for laurel wilt. We're going to be doing some stuff in Alberta over the next few months, kind of implementing the Missouri River Watershed Coalition model into Alberta, and which will be nice because that, combined with some of the work that's going on in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, gives us an idea of what our distribution looks north of the border, and eventually will help us create some maps like this that will really show the range across North America of different species. Mentioned Texas earlier. Another group is the Invasive Plant Atlas in New England. It was one of the first really early detection citizen scientist programs, and we're going to be also taking over the database and website management for this program and including it in the EDDMapS. Finally, I want to mention an initiative we've been working with, the North American Invasive Species Network, and this is a group of centers across the U.S. that have come together, and as part of that, we're going to be implementing the Global Invasive Species Information Network Protocol, and so EDDMapS will become a mirror of that data, and so included in that's a lot of plant as well as some of the aquatic and some of the other species that will be mirroring, and then also providing our data back to this global information network. Some other features, users are able to go in and manage their reports, view, edit, revisit, delete. Revisits, particularly important when you'd be checking traps or checking infestations, on an annual basis, to go back and put, annotate the original record as opposed to creating a new one for each year, so you could track change over time. And I mentioned earlier the alert system. I think that might be something that would be, very interesting for y'all's program, where you could go on and create species level alerts, and then those alerts could be sent out regionally when a new pest is found and confirmed. We're also going to build some better searching and exporting features and some queries and other things to kind of enhance the interface of the website. Our focus recently has been on these mobile app developments and adding some new features, but we're going to continue to kind of enhance the website side of things also, with the final goal of basically having a lot of different ways to get database information and aggregate it into one single database system. So I guess to sum up, EDDMapS, the framework is there. Yes, it's been primarily used for plants, but it definitely is able to be expanded to other taxa, and we're doing some of that with both biocontrol agents and the animals in Florida. We've been able to quickly, because the framework's in place, develop custom applications fairly quickly and fairly inexpensively. The whole point of this was to make something that was fast and easy to use, did not require knowledge of GIS, use the Google Maps and some Flash technologies to keep it and make it simple for anybody to go on and use. We've seen it being used both by volunteer groups and by professionals, and that's really been the goal, is to make it complex enough that it works for professionals in the field, but then also where citizen scientists, the general public can find it and report things. And a lot of what we've tried to do is not replace other existing systems, but provide support and the database infrastructure if that's needed for some of these other projects. And probably most importantly for y'all, it's a tool and a platform that can facilitate early detection and then also some kind of response, but through the online and phone-based data entry, and then the email alerts that can go out from there. And kind of from this and our other projects, we've kind of had some proven stability on what we can do. So that's all that I have. I have probably talked too long, but we can go from here and talk about whatever specific questions, or if there's something I didn't cover that you maybe are interested in.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. This is Helmut again. So please have put forward some of your questions that you have to Chuck.
Helmut?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm Susan in California. The question has to do, and I've been listening to the webinar. The question I have is on data security. I know that you've got it physically housed in a secure area, but the security of the data, I don't want to say how hack-proof is something, because anything can be hacked, but do you have security systems in place to try to prevent this?
Yeah, and we have really made that we're using enterprise level Microsoft SQL Server database and Windows systems, and we make sure that we like you said, anything can be hacked, but with the university firewalls in place. And part of, we struggle with sometimes because the campus that we're actually located on is a joint university USDA facility, and so that actually sometimes causes us more headaches in terms of security and access, just because of trying to meet both the university and the USDA security standards. But we have done everything we can to make sure that the information that is captured is secure, and there's not an easy way for somebody with a little bit of knowledge to be able to access any kind of information that we would not want.
Well, I know that since you're dealing with regulatory issues, that would be a very big concern, and one which I got royally roasted on yesterday when I approached it to somebody here, and they were all in a twitch about information and that which would be shared, and one of the questions that I came up with was, if you have an infestation that you report, and in California, I'll take the example of fruit flies, we find them, we delimitate them, and then we eradicate them. And this has been going on for years. So is there a way, or do you add buttons? And my knowledge is very limited, so please forgive my ignorance here, on if we said that we found XYZ fly in LA County and then later eradicated it, would there be a way to make note that it was gone?
Yes, absolutely. And the question, technically, all of that is absolutely possible. That really will really come back to a, more of a business practice standard of how you handle it. Do you keep the historical record and mark it as eradicated, or do you, delete it from the database when it's eradicated? And I would say that, you're probably better to, for historical purposes, change it, change the status to eradicated, and then, create, when you're mapping some of the stuff, have it where, you show the counties where it was previously found but now eradicated, and then when you would click on the county, you would have that historical record that would be there in terms of when it was found, what was done, and now that the status is eradicated.
Okay, along the same line, found out, it has to do with, California has their code of regulations, and we've got a list of noxious weeds, and we also have specific regulations for insects and diseases that respond a certain type of response. I'm trying to see where I'm going with this. I apologize. Is there an official list, or were you thinking of developing an official list for actionable pests that really need to be noted as opposed to might need to be noted? I don't know if I'm even making sense here. I apologize.
Well, no, you definitely are. As of right now, our focus has been primarily on plants, and part of that has been because we haven't been engaging, you and y'all's colleagues from the regulatory side of things to move into the insect and disease side of things, where some of those regulations, really become an issue. For plants in the east, there's very few plant regulations, and so when we developed the system for the western states, the decision was made is that everything that, we started off with a list of early detection species, and so those species were all considered actionable going, from the plant side of things, and so none of those would show up, live in the system until, the state weed coordinator signed off on them being okay to release. And so the way the actionable could work is it could work two different ways. It could work that anything reported in a certain area, let's say California, Oregon, wherever, anything that's reported in that area we would consider actionable and not show up until somebody signs off on it. Or it could work at the species level where, some species are considered actionable and some are not. And now that we've opened up for those western states to be able to report weeds that both would be actionable and not actionable, then, we might have some species that would show up and not, they would show up automatically, and then and other species, it would have to be reviewed first, and so it would be done at the species level.
Okay.
That made sense.
It did as much as my knowledge will allow me on data systems and things of that nature. You mentioned that
the concern that we've always had is, we did not want somebody to be able to go in and report MRAS for in Georgia until the state regulatory, we didn't want that to show up in EDDMapS until the state Department of Ag and APHIS signed off on it. And so that's part of why we've haven't until this point, I guess, dealt with insects and diseases, but the same could definitely be true for plants where there really are regulatory concerns if a certain parasitic plant or a certain other plant showed up on this system, and it showed up before anybody in the regulatory side of things knew about it.
Okay. You were saying that you're working with Texas that has its own system, and I'm going to make a guess, and I'm looking at one of my IT people, that California also has its own system. I don't know if you can link into our system or not. I haven't talked to our legal people. I haven't talked to our IT people yet, but we already have a system of reporting that is in place. I believe they also have mapping capabilities. And did I understand you that the system can be designed in such a way that you can incorporate the information that we already have, and as you said, you aggregate the data, but you would not be replacing it. Right? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, what our interest would be, for groups that have their own system in place, to be able to, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, take the data from that system and make it available. So, a system that y'all would build in California would be, obviously just focused on California. And so, but, if EDDMapS and the California system are linked together, then, the distribution information for y'all's system would show up, nationally and help, the states that don't have their own systems and maybe using EDDMapS, then that data would be part of it, so it'd help everybody get a better national picture. So if that answered that question. I mean, and that can be done manually, or it can be done, automatically through different types of web services. It depends on it really depends on how often the data is changing and how critical it is, how time sensitive it is in terms of whether it's something that's done on a monthly basis, or if it's something that's done on a quarterly, or it's automatic through a web service. The other thing that we have done and can continue to do is make sure that if something is reported in California through EDDMapS, that's sent to the appropriate people in California, or we could point the California data entry directly to y'all's reporting site.
We have somebody with a question here. This is Kathy.
I'm trying to get close to the microphone.
I have a question. You mentioned that you would clear with the State Department of Agriculture and USDA when a new pest is reported for a state. You use the emerald ash borer as an example. Does that apply to just the quarantine pests, or would that apply to anything? I mean, will the list for each state be verified by that state before it goes online?
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that would be, I mean, if we were to I mean, that's always part of the conversation when we start talking to somebody about implementing EDDMapS in a state or in a region. it all depends on how much you know, how much work you want, you know, to put on yourself, and whether or not and how quickly you'd want some of the data to be available. You know, and a lot of that comes back to you've got to have you know, the educational program in place so people know to download the iPhone app or know to go to the website and report things. And because if they're not reporting, but you know, if you're not getting very many reports, then it does not become a big deal for you to review those reports that are coming in. When it becomes a bigger deal for you to review those points that are coming in is when you'd be getting a lot more of those points coming in. And so that's something that not only can be set up at the beginning, but it also can be changed over time, you know, as the system might grow or be used more in a particular state. You know, and there's lots of ways to do it. Is whether you limit what you want people to report to a certain target list of species, which becomes more important for an iPhone type application than it does for a website. On a website, you can pretty much have it where you can report anything, but on a mobile phone, you probably have to have a shorter list. And then, you know, you could make it be on a species level that some reports automatically go in for certain areas. I mean, basically all of that can and is flexible. And part of it is just how much reviewing you would want to do on your end when a report comes in. You know, I really think that you know, when we first had a conversation with Helmut about this, was that what I see the benefit possibly could be for, you know, the folks represented on the phone is, you know, if the weed folks in some of these states are starting to use EDDMapS, promote EDDMapS, then as a way to report invasive plants or noxious weeds, then it would be nice if they could also use the same framework to report, you know, animals, insects, or plant diseases. And so that's what I really, you know, what our real interest is if we can work with y'all to make this work for regulatory and you know, species, then it would be, you know, a win-win for everybody. And since, you know, in a lot of cases the weed folks have bought in already, then this would just be expanding it, and it could be, you know, something that could be implemented, you know, a larger region and continue to expand.
Part of where I'm coming from on this, my field is plant pathology, so I'm interested mostly in the plant disease portion. Currently, and you mentioned in terms of the weeds and vegetation that you are populating your database with other known information that's out there, say herbarium specimens and so on. And currently, as we speak, there's more than one list out on different people's websites that say these are the commonly known diseases that occur, or pathogens which occur in California. This is not a list that California made. This is a list that's made up by other entities. And in some cases, it's inaccurate. So I guess my concern would be pulling other data out of other people's websites, or what might be assumed to be the case but isn't truly the case about what is or is not in California. So that's, I wouldn't want something like that to happen with this particular database.
Is there the possibility of having on the data, because that's my concern too, is that you have the notice that says official, so that it would be officially acknowledged by whatever state, in this particular case state in California, that it has been officially acknowledged and noted in California's database. Is there a way that that could be noted on the map so that they kind of have an idea of who did the citizen work, but who did the official work.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had that very discussion both from the plant side in terms of when something was historical data and maybe it was documented by herbarium records or literature as opposed to an actual in the field sighting that has pictures to go along with it. And so, you could do that on multiple levels, and you could have where on the map it showed up and it said, okay, well, here's the data from citizen scientists. Here's the data from citizen scientists that has been officially recognized by the California Department of Agriculture. And then here's the, other data that came from other sources, whether that be, NAPIS or whatever source that may be. We have been very careful that we don't just take large sets of data from anybody. We try to make sure that when we get a large set of data, that it's from a reputable source, and then but it's referenced back to what that source is. So if there's a question that comes up, we can go back to the original contact person and find out, what happened. And a lot of times, some of these errors and mistakes and problems don't show up until you put them on a map, and then somebody goes, "Hey, that's not right." There was yellow star thistle data for Minnesota that was in both plants database and the Photo of North America, and it never showed up until we started this project and entered that data, and the state weed coordinator looked at it and said, well, that's not right. We haven't seen yellow star thistle in these counties in any of the history that they can remember. And so they went and tracked down the original source, and the original source was a journal article that mentioned it being in these counties, but it didn't really have a good source. And so the decision was made to remove it from the database. But we kept that kind of documentation and that story. So, 10 years from now, if it did pop up again in one of those counties, we would have that historical reference of, well, hey, maybe it was there originally, and just nobody had found it.
This is Helmut again. One thing, the original idea of our proposal was to have a region-wide, quick way to get information out on invasive species. And the second objective was to open this up, the reporting system, to many more people than we actually have. And considering our budget constraints down the road, we will be even more limited to find invasive species. So this was an idea to get other people involved who are sort of working professionally or non-professionally in that field. So I think it is very important, of course, the issue with the regulatory consequences of a finding, and as you showed, Chuck, in your presentation there, I think no data goes out unless it has been approved by the regulatory agency in the state. So I think that's important, and I think also, I mean, whatever list you want to have published, I think that probably would be up to the agency that is participating. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and that that especially gets with plants. It's sort of easy because there's probably only about 12 to 1,500 plants that that are really issues right now anywhere in the United States, and so that you can have a pretty short list. Although, quite honestly, one of the first reports into EDDMapS from Missouri River was a plant that had never been identified in the United States before. And so, so you've got, when you start talking about insects and diseases, and we definitely know this from our image database system, the numbers get quite large quite fast. And so, obviously the system's not going to have the capability for you to report, 300,000 different insect species. But what you could do is, here's your target list, and then here's the unknown thing that Joe landowner, homeowner found in their yard, and they want to send in. And, the question is, how many of those unknown thing reports are you going to get? And when you get them, something's going to happen. And but in a lot of ways, I've not seen anywhere where this has been, something where anybody's been overwhelmed with the number of reports that come in through the system. I think it's going to get more with the iPhone apps. You're going to start having a lot more reports coming in, but in a lot of ways that's good because that's more eyes on the ground and ways to people looking for things, and even better, I think, as I mentioned earlier, that I think in a lot of ways a system like this is as useful as an educational tool as it is as a mapping and as a reporting tool, because when you're doing educational programs, well, here's something that the public can do to help. And hopefully prevent the next MRS4 before it spreads too large to be a major regulatory nightmare.
Yeah. So in following up there with the list of insects reporting, yes, our idea was anyhow to sort of select basically the most dangerous invasives that we do not want, where we have a high risk for Oregon, be California, whatever state, and then have those guys report. We don't want any just June beetle reported or Pandora moth or whatever native stuff that people may have. So we have to select it out at the very beginning at the reporting part. So this way you can limit the number of reports.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be the way to do it is, hey, and I would suggest in making that list that some of the species on that list be stuff that the user would find, because if not, you don't know how successful your educational effort is if you don't get any reports. You don't know if people are not using it because they're not using it, or they're not using it because everything that's on the list is stuff that is, most likely not going to be found anyway.
So are there more questions out there for Chuck?
Basically, we've got this service that we can, provide and work with y'all to make happen. If it's something that y'all are interested in doing, we'd be interested in working with you to help meet this need, and so efforts could be focused on other things instead of rebuilding the wheel.
So this would be the practical part now. So how easy would it be, Chuck, to sort of include insects in your system?
I mean, it would, I would say it would, the difficulty would not be, it would not be that difficult to do, and could be something that we could do fairly quickly and fairly inexpensively. It would just, be looking at what species, what states were included, and what what species were included, and what figuring out exactly the process of what happens when something gets reported. But we could definitely do that for insects and diseases, and especially if y'all's focus is on the educational side of things. Depending on what you wanted for a reporting app, currently our reporting app is limited to Florida. We're in the process with what's invasive you know, to have something that will be more flexible, and we could build this into the process with what's invasive to make sure that you know, it had a way for y'all to report insects, so we could build a version of what's invasive that would work for your needs.
More questions out there?
Helmut, this is Slade in Wyoming, and I'm probably coming from the perspective of a state that, or a person who's involved with it from the noxious weed aspect, and at least from the noxious weed aspect, this whole EDDMapS system certainly made it a lot easier for us, especially in the Rocky Mountain states, to communicate a lot better on the noxious weeds and find out what's going on in the other states. So at least from that perspective, noxious weeds, the system has worked fairly well. Whether that's going to apply also to the insect aspect, you know, I guess you guys might have some comments on that or some thoughts on that. But the ability for Chuck and his crew to kind of adapt the system to what we needed and species we needed, and the validation system has, I guess, from my perspective, at least from as long as we've had it in place, has been fairly effective for what we needed for noxious weeds.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful. So, well, probably what we have to do is, I think the next few steps is to have another sort of conference call here with our CDFA colleagues and whoever else is interested in our region to work on some more details and see if we can then maybe get you guys, Chuck and Keith, to work on some pilot project here to see how that would work, how easy it would be. And I guess, you know, looking at your presentation there, I mean, this is not going to happen overnight. So this is going to be a long-term process, but we got to start it, and we have a good basis actually to start with. So I think that is, and again, this was our, at the very beginning when we wrote that, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we have something to work from and with. I think maybe we'll sit together again at maybe a face-to-face meeting or just a conference call to see what everybody's thinking about EDDMapS and the possibility that it has for our purpose, and make a decision then.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I mean, you know, part of it, I guess, is figuring. I mean, what I would say is figuring out, you know, whether how much of the work is done on our end and how much the work is done on y'all's end. You know, I guess the biggest thing for insects would be, you know, or diseases is, you know, the form's going to obviously look different from the current form, and whether that form is something that we develop or something y'all develop in terms of what information you want captured. That would probably be the first step in order to get something up and running. And you know, once we had that form decision made, then getting the web interface to this could be something that could happen fairly quickly, and then moving toward the to a mobile application would be something that, you know, we could get done. It would just be, you know, working around some of our other commitments that might need to be done first. So.
Yeah, we're just, you know, thinking about going back to the pilot kind of project there that we maybe, you know, say here, and I'm sorry if I offend any of the pathologists out there, and let's maybe limit it to a couple of species or so, insect species, and just work a pilot program out there, and then once that's set up, this can be probably easily extended to other species.
Right. And I guess what I would like to say, no matter what happens and what decisions y'all make, is that we'd be interested in working with you to help include any information and data that's collected in EDDMapS as we move forward, because we're going to be expanding to do other taxa as opportunities arise. And so, being able to work with y'all to include that data from your internal systems would, when appropriate, would be something we definitely want to do. So, if you have any other questions or something come up, send us an email, and just, as y'all move forward, let us know what you need from us.
And just one comment, think about how this could be integrated into and extend the programs you already have going. It's not something separate or different. It's just linking and leveraging and trying to maximize both the reporting but also the educational component that leads to minimizing the impacts of these things.
And again, this is Helmut. When we discussed that with you guys, Chuck and Keith, and there's something for the other folks, we have still two different systems. We have our survey database where we have to report to APHIS what we do. This is not going to go away with that, or it's not going to be integrated, because APHIS will have their IFIS system, and we all got to input the data there. But so EDDMapS, or whatever we then call it, or is another system for reporting. So these are two different systems, and how we then link them maybe down the road, that's a different question. But so right now we're trying to get that we have a very quick way to communicate within our region and expand the reporting to anybody who has a cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really been what our goal has been with this program from the start, is to kind of fill that niche.
All right, are there more questions out there, guys?
And I will try to get this hopefully converted fairly easily and upload it somewhere, and send you all a link to any of your colleagues that couldn't participate can take a look at it.
All right, last chance. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chuck and Keith, for your presentation. And so that, as I said, the next step will be to have some more discussions and then get back to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.